this is Michèle at Dasami Bookworm Podcast. Now, I know you have all been eagerly awaiting for the fourth installment of the Glasgow Square Mile of Murders. The fourth installment is the murder of Marion Gilchrist. Now, the exciting part of this is that this will be delivered in 2 parts because it is a wonderful story and you don't want to miss a part of it. When I say wonderful, I don't mean the gruesome part, but I mean most interesting. And of course, this is going to be delivered by one of our favorite interviewees, Judith Bowers. Welcome, Judith.
Hi, Michèle. How you doing?
We're doing wonderful. I'm really excited about hearing about this. I know a little bit of the story, but I always learn more when I'm with you. So please start at the beginning or the middle.
Well, it's kind of a good time to actually start this story because, of course, you know, with November coming and December coming, and it is a Christmas story, really. Christmas murder. It all began on the 21st of December of 1908 in the evening when the family downstairs, the Adams family, strangely enough, were sitting getting ready for Christmas preparations. Not that Christmas was a big thing in Glasgow at that time because it wasn't actually an official holiday until the 1950s. But Arthur Adams himself was a flautist with one of the local orchestras, and I believe that they were getting some preparations ready for Christmas celebrations, wrapping presents, maybe singing hymns, that kind of thing, when they heard a tap on the floor upstairs. Now, upstairs lived an old lady, Marion Gilchrist. She was 82 years old. And she had a little code with them that if she was in trouble, if she fell over or if anything happened to her, she would knock on the floor, tap on the floor with her walking stick, and that would alert them. So Arthur's 2 sisters sent Arthur upstairs to see if Marion was okay. And he went up the stairs, knocked on the door, nobody answered. So he stood there and waited for a minute, couldn't hear anything. So he thought, oh, maybe we just heard it, maybe she was out. So he went back downstairs again, but his 2 sisters were insistent that he go back upstairs and gain entry one way or another to make sure that the old lady was all right. And to be honest with you, I think Arthur Adams himself, he comes over as kind of a gentle sort of character, not the sort of character that's going to kick a door in to try and find an old lady. So he went back upstairs and he knocked again and he waited, and he was just about to turn round and leave again when Nellie Lambie, the maid, came back up the stairs. Now, Nellie had gone out to go and fetch her mistress's newspaper. She did this for her mistress every evening. And when she saw Arthur standing there, she said, you know, can I help you? And she says, well, I just want to make sure that your mistress is okay. Because we were sitting downstairs, we heard her knocking, we heard, 3 taps, and we just want to make sure that she's okay because that was her code. And Nellie said, oh, no, I'm sure she's absolutely fine. I've only left a few minutes ago. It might have been the pulleys clicking, the drying pulley. She might have, for some reason, decided to put her own washing on the line.
No, I don't think so.
Very strange thing for an 82-year-old lady with a maid to do, but there you go. But Nellie thought maybe she had pulled the pulley down and that's what the clicking was. Or maybe she was chopping a bit of wood for the fire.
That seems just as strange as well.
It's not the sort of thing I think Marion would have done, to be honest with you. So anyway, Nellie let the 2 of them into the flat, and I'm going to read from the newspaper report because I think this is the best way to describe what happened next.
Excellent.
Hastening to open the door, the maid and Mr. Adams entered the hallway as a stranger came with nonchalance from the lighted interior of one of the back rooms, passed the couple with greatest coolness, and walked swiftly downstairs. His unconcernedness was astounding. He impressed Adams and the girl with the air of an ordinary visitor. A few minutes more and the servant maid became hysterical at the awful result of the visit. The spectacle was full of frights and contrast of the dead and the living, and it repeated itself for those whose courage or official duty prompted them to regard it. Now, dear listener, I am reading the actual report the next day in the newspaper from the Daily Record, and if you are at all of a queasy nature, or if you don't like graphic detail, switch off right now, because this next bit is journalism of the early 20th century, and it is rather grim. Have you turned off? Are you still with me? Anyway, here we go. I warned you. The blaze of gaslight in the old-fashioned dining room was vivid. Nearly everything was undisturbed and spoke of the taste of a lady of refined and careful habits. The body, as it had fallen under the blows of the murderer, lay rigid before a living flame, whose light kept the death pallor out of the lined and worn old face. The black dress was scarcely ruffled. The head alone indicated the brutality of the assault. The skull was battered in, the cheeks hacked, and an eye dislodged. Well, that's a pretty grim description.
That is. And for someone to discover that and see that, the maid, Nellie, no wonder she screamed.
She certainly did scream. She screamed, and Arthur Adams ran out of the house and down the stairs and into the street, Westminster Street in the West End, St. George's Cross, and he made the cry of murder. Whilst Nellie, according to the story, a lot of the notes anyway, Nellie went in, and her mistress actually was still very much hanging on to life, but only just hanging on to life.
After that gruesome?
After that gruesome description, according to Nellie Lambie, her mistress managed to whisper just a couple of letters to her. Yes, those letters are A, B.
Oh, how could she, with that horrific wounds?
Mm-hmm. And then she died. Then she expired. That was the end of her.
Oh, my.
But it was never mentioned again in the case. Never mentioned again in the case. Anyway, the police arrived pretty quickly, and the first detective on the scene was a Lieutenant Inspector John Thompson Trench, award-winning detective. He was brilliant at his job. He was well known. He was well loved, well-respected detective. And he identified the murder weapon as a dining room chair and also the coal bucket. But it appeared that the dining room chair did the most of the damage. That's what had most of the sort of gore attached to it. And there was also bloody fingerprints all over this chair leg. But the chair was never mentioned again. And even though fingerprinting had become a science then, they could do fingerprints, they also chose not to bring the fingerprints in.
So this seems like it was kind of botched from the beginning. And Nellie said she hadn't been gone that long. How could all that have happened in a very short period of time?
Well, that's one thing that they've never really sort of managed to discover. This is one of the great mystery cases of Glasgow history, because, in fact, it is so well written about that it's even included, or has been included, in police journals as an example of how not to do police work, because everything in this case was absolutely fudged. First of all, the newspapers were given information to send out, and one of the police reports, they say they interview Nellie Lambie, and they ask Nellie Lambie if anything is missing. Nellie says that the bedroom was turned over.
Okay.
A workbox was smashed.
Okay.
And in this workbox, there contained letters, receipts, papers, invoices, that kind of thing. She couldn't say if anything was missing out of the workbox, but what she did say was missing was a diamond crescent brooch. It was in the shape of a crescent moon. She also said that on the inside of all the curtains, Miss Gilchrist used to sew all her valuable jewellery into the inside of her curtains, and nothing was missing from the inside of the curtains. So certainly it looks like whatever they were in to get, they were disturbed and had to leave quickly. And I say they, although they only saw one man in the hallway, and he is in later newspaper articles described as a man in a pale-coloured overcoat. They never talk about the second person, and they believe that there was a second person involved, that one person was murdering Marion while the other person was in the bedroom doing the ransacking and escaped out of the bedroom window.
Well, if the person doing the ransacking escaped out the window, then the person doing the murder would have been covered in blood.
Well, that's what you'd think, isn't it? And of course, they never describe the person in the pale-coloured overcoat as covered in blood. The person they saw in the hallway looked like he should have been there. As that newspaper report said, they didn't have any suspicions about him whatsoever. So, who was this second person? Was the first person the murderer or not? Unlikely, because you really would have thought, as you're quite right to say, Michèle, that it had been covered in blood and gore and and would have looked very suspicious. Anyway, there was a description put out to all the pawnbrokers of the brooch. There was a description of the man in the pale-coloured overcoat put out in all the newspapers, and there was a reward of £50 put up for any information pertaining to this. And a man called Alan McLean was one of the first people to come forward. He came up to the Maryhill police station, and he said that on the night of the murder, he was in his club, and a German by the name of Oscar Slater had approached him to sell him a pawn ticket for a brooch fitting the same description as the one missing from Marion's house. And that was it. The police were on Oscar Slater's case.
Just from that one clue, they had botched everything else. No fingerprints, nothing else was taken. And from that, they focused on him because that would be the easiest one to go for.
Well, the thing is with Oscar, first of all, he was a German Jew.
Oh, okay.
We're talking 1901. Jews weren't overly popular in Glasgow anyway at that time because of the Jewish immigrants that had arrived earlier. And Germany was already starting to be on bad terms with the UK, because the Kaiser was already, causing ructions. So we were kind of just pre-World War One. So there was already a little bit of anti-German attitudes going on. So that was number one for poor Oscar Slater. Poor Oscar Slater. There's nothing poor about him, to be honest with you. Oscar had also only been in Glasgow for several weeks, maybe a couple of months at most. He was a known jewellery dealer.
Oh,
But he dealt specifically in knocked-off items. He was also a known gambler, and he ran a lot of illegal card games. And, you'll love this, he lived with a prostitute, Antonio Junio, at 69 St. George's
gosh.
Road. And it actually has outside on the nameplate, A. Anderson Dentist. So as a gentleman visiting, could look like they were going for a different kind of oral, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. And of course, Oscar Slater was well known to the police by this point. He'd only been in Glasgow for a couple of months, but he'd been arrested several times.
Oh, that was an easy fit up for them.
Perfect fit up for him. Perfect fit up for them. And there was a very good reason why, but nobody knows what that reason is. But anyway, I'll come back to that. They decided that Oscar Slater was guilty. There was no other way but that man was guilty. So by this time it's the 23rd of December, and they decide they're going to go around Oscar Slater's house. They're going to arrest him. So they get round there, and a wee maid opens the door, and she says, no, they've gone. And the police are like, what do you mean they've gone? Oh, well, Madame Junior and Oscar left this morning to join the Lusitania because they're spending New Year in New York.
Oh.
So the police were like, oh, that's it. They're escaping from the law.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Total fit up. So it was decided then by two of the other detectives, two of the Detective Trench's superiors, in fact, Ord and what was their name? Ord and Douglas were the names of the other two. I think they were chief inspectors. And they had decided that they would, I think it was Douglas, Chief Inspector Douglas was then to go on another ship to New York to intercept him and bring Oscar Slater back to the UK to face justice. And he was to take with him 3 witnesses, and the 3 witnesses were Arthur Adams, Nellie Lambie, and a young maid called Mary Barrowman. And Mary had claims that she had seen a man in a pale-coloured overcoat leaving the house at West Princes Street on the night of the murder. And so she was obviously, as far as the police were concerned, a witness as well. Meantime, Detective Inspector John Thompson Trench, award-winning detective, remember, well-respected, well-regarded detective, was like, hold on a minute. I was at the murder case that night, and there's no mention of, this chair in any of these reports. In fact, on the night that Douglas and Ord went into the house with, I think, another police officer called Piper, and they investigate because they went into the house to search it for any evidence of any weapon, and they came out with a hammer with rust spots on it, and they claim those rust spots were bloodstains.
But was it tested?
Well, they claimed that it was tested and it was bloodstains, but that's when John Thompson Trench was like, no, I saw the murder weapon. The murder weapon was the dining room chair, not this hammer. That's obviously rust.
Yes.
And that's why John Thompson Trench got sacked.
Oh, my.
And discredited from the police force.
No.
Yes.
Because he didn't agree with his superiors.
Yes.
He was bringing logic into it. Oh.
Yes, because it was a cover-up, because they were covering up the real murder. But I'll come back to that in the next episode. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I always wait for that. I hate to wait for things.
I know. But meanwhile, they're on this. They decide they're going to go apprehend Oscar Slater. They're going to apprehend Oscar Slater in New York with his girlfriend Antonio Junio. By the way, at this point, Oscar Slater was quite possibly leaving Glasgow because of his ex-wife, because he had an ex-wife who he'd left in London previously because she was haranguing him for money. And I think that he'd left her. Actually, his name wasn't even Oscar Slater. It was Otto Sandman. So he'd already changed his name by the time he got to Glasgow to Oscar Slater.
Oh, gosh.
So that his wife couldn't find him because she's after him for money, and she's obviously tracked him down to Glasgow. So I think, some people do think, I certainly think that one of the reasons why he was leaving for New York with Antonio Junio anyway was to escape his ex-wife.
It was all about the timing for things.
All about the timing. He had nothing to do with Marion's murder. Well, we don't think so. Or did he? It's hard to say. But then again, I'll let you into a little secret about that in the next episode as well. But meanwhile, they're on their way to apprehend Oscar Slater. They've got Pinkerton's men on the way to apprehend him as well. And of course, Pinkerton was from the Gorbals.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Pinkerton was a Glasgow lad, and he's the one that set up Pinkerton's detective agency, and of course Pinkerton's men, which were like,
became famous.
yeah,
Yes,
they became famous marshals, basically, weren't they? So Pinkerton's men were off to apprehend Oscar Slater as well, and yes, they did in fact apprehend him in New York, arrested him on the Lusitania. They sent telegram to the Lusitania to say, hold this guy, and Oscar Slater was indeed arrested, and he was absolutely shocked. He could not believe he was being arrested because according to him, he didn't even know Marion Gilchrist. According to him, yes. I know you're listening to this, but I just went to Michèle, the Pinocchio. The Pinocchio nose. Imagine the Pinocchio nose. Yes, Oscar Slater didn't know Pinocchio nose, Marion Gilchrist. Or did he? Well, you'll find out in my next episode. But certainly, he believed himself innocent enough to turn around to Pinkerton's men and to Ord and Douglas and whoever had actually apprehended him on the oh no, I need to go back a bit.
Okay, I like this.
Oh, I forgot. I should have said, of course, we've got the 3 witnesses, haven't we?
I know. I was about to ask, they just, the Pinkerton's men say, yeah, was that him? There wouldn't have been a lineup, would there?
Well, the thing is that it is believed that Nellie, Arthur Adams, and Mary were all coached by Detective Douglas on the way over on the Lusitania. And so when Oscar Slater was presented to them, all 3 of them said, yes, that's him. And that's when Oscar Slater was like, I'm completely innocent. I've never even met Marion Gilchrist, Pinocchio knows. I know nothing about this murder case. Possible Pinocchio knows. I'm completely innocent. And so, although he was arrested, he actually voluntarily came back to Glasgow, where he believed he would get a fair trial.
Oh, well, yeah, that wasn't ever going to happen. But he couldn't have known that at the time.
Of course he couldn't. I mean, he believed in British justice, apparently, and he believed that he would get a fair trial and he'd be able to put his side of the story, and that he was be proved without a doubt of being 100% innocent in a Scottish court of law. And to find out what happened, tune in next time.
Oh, so you'll have to wait for another week. It's a weekly serial with 2 parts. Not like the serialized stories from years and years ago, but this will be a 2-part. However, I think we have a book reading that's going to be coming up in an episode soon, and that might be considered serialized, so that's a wonderful thing.
Well, that'll be 12 episodes, won't it?
Yes.
One a month.
So yes, absolutely. We'll more to hear about that soon. So we finished part 1 about Oscar Slater. Now this is where the audience has time to go away and think about the true innocence or guilt, Pinocchio knows, the circumstances that a person can be placed in and be innocent of a particular crime, although he doesn't sound like a completely innocent man. And that can be the problem too. You're innocent of one thing, guilty of another, and then they just want to throw the book. And if it made it easier for them and a guilty plea and out, and that's
Great
it.
scapegoat. Great, perfect scapegoat.
I can't wait for part 2. So we are nearing the end of this, where we'll ask you for your shout out. Judith, who would you like to give your shout out to today?
I think I would like to give my shout out today to the descendants of Nellie Lambie, because poor Nellie, I think, was put right through it when it came to discovering her poor mistress and everything that happened afterwards. Poor Nellie Lambie. So to the descendants of Nellie Lambie, I salute you.
And my shout out is to the justice system such as it is. My shout out is to all of those that believe in justice and that it will prevail, because we always have to hope that it will. And that's what we're going to find out, if it will or not prevail in this story. So this is Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast. As always, wishing you a sunny day.